my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth, to live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Hello and welcome to Growing Edge Live. I'm so glad that you're joining us today. If you're here for the first time, I know you're going to enjoy today's conversation, as will those that are joining us as regular viewers. So thanks for being here. We are all about having conversations with soul-centered individuals that are channeling their time, their talent, their energy, their resources, and their love into doing good work in the world. The individuals, the guests that I have on the show really are beings of light, and no matter what they do, they make a difference and an impact in the world and bring people together in love and joy. So today I have a wonderful guest. She's a new friend of mine. I recently met Therese Lee at Unity Village in Missouri at the affiliated New Thought Network retreat. So I'm going to share a little bit about Therese. She is a Unity Truth student and has been for 36 years, and an ordained Unity minister for 18. Her personal practice of prayer, meditation, and compassionate service is dedicated to working for God. In honor of her now angel-winged husband, Reverend Tom Lee, and the gift of his 3 children and their 8 grandchildren. She currently serves Unity's Spiritual Center, Hilton Head, as their senior minister, and also as a grief recovery method specialist. She assists others in transforming their lives by accepting change, acknowledging loss, and allowing healing. And her mission is to love out loud. Yes. Welcome, Therese. It's so good to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Wow. That is a lot to love out loud. How's that going?
Well, my grandchildren ask me to not be the loud Nana at the games that I go to when I'm sitting courtside. Otherwise, it makes a difference, I think, Allie, when we meet people. And I'm in South Carolina now. I'm from Chicago originally, so I'm a little different than Southern people might be. And it's intriguing. We always have a conversation.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get to know you a little better myself, but I love our audience, our viewers, to get an idea of who you are and how you got to be this minister and this grief recovery method specialist. How was your childhood? Were you always spiritually inclined? Was your family? What was your early experiences being a spiritual being?
I would say as a kid, I was religious by command. Raised originally one of 7 children, very strict, devout. My parents were both very devout Catholic. I don't know that I knew of a loving God. I had never heard of spirituality, as a kid. And so my mother passed. So grief started early in my life. Grandmother died at 10 and my mom died when I was 11. So wow. 2, influential females in my life gone. And yet no one talked about it. It was just, move on, don't be sad, because then dad will be sad. That kind of upbringing. And so there was an aloneness that I don't experience today, but I do remember it as a child, not knowing who God was.
So that must have been such a impact, losing your mother at 11 years old.
Yes.
And where were you in the lineup of children?
I'm 5th of 7. Okay. And within a year, my father remarried. It was 1970, right? So he remarried a woman who had 4 children, and also a devout Catholic. So we became yours and mine. We never went to the ours part. So there were 11 of us children. And we all lived in the house together. We bought a new house together. And again, not much mention, certainly no mention of their father passing or my mother passing. And certainly I didn't know what God was then. So just a kid struggling to figure out how you're supposed to survive.
Mm-hmm. So that early experience of grief must have really shaped you as, a young one, as a teenager. How did it impact you? Now you know so much more about it, but
Right.
looking back, how did that great loss impact you?
I became very angry. Probably that lasted till I found unity at about 28. I was considered tough, I guess. I could be strong to make it through whatever situation. Don't see that as I love strength today. I don't necessarily condone being strong over having strength. We just had to keep figuring out how to move on and stuff what I call today stuffing the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I was sad, it might influence my father, or we just needed to move on. We had a new mother, so you're going to love her, and you're going to love your new brothers and sisters, and just keep going forward. So now I can look back and see I became almost, I might say, robotic. Of you just do this. You just don't have to have feelings. You're going to be fine. You're tough. You're going to get through it no matter what. So I pretty much by 30 thought I was invincible and angry as well. Very angry.
So 35, you said you came across unity in your 20s.
At 28. Yeah.
So what did you work? Did you?
I did. I was a publisher of magazines in the metal industry, very successful. And I left home at 17 and then had a huge, just developed a huge career. Got married when I was 25 to someone who was a Buddhist.
Wow.
And even though we were married in the Catholic Church, he had to get his special dispensation, from the Pope. But my uncle was a Catholic priest, and he and I were very close. And so he married us. And I learned from his name was Kurt, from Kurt about going within, all the things we know today about finding the God of our understanding within us and realizing that I could be at peace if I chose to be, no matter what was going on around me. And that was a new skill to get at 25. And learning how to live differently than the first 25 years of my life. And I'm grateful that he was my husband then.
Yeah. So when you say he was a Buddhist, was he sort of a practicing, like going to a temple, or was he just following the philosophy and meditative practice?
He wasn't affiliated with a temple. He just knew he was a martial artist. And so he had this exposure. And he wasn't raised in a religion, like I was. So for me, it was wonderful and freeing and liking yourself and not worrying about whether God liked me, because that was just a given. And I learned that from him.
It sounds like he must have been quite an influence on you at that
yes.
very time.
Yes. Yeah, I met him when I was 20, and then, we parted ways when I was 30. Yeah.
Okay. So up to that point, were there other people that you, looking back today, would say were a big influence for you in maybe a positive way or a negative way? Were there people that impacted you and shaped you?
My father was a Big Ten referee and a high school coach, very gregarious. I think I'm very much like him as far as how outgoing I am and loving life. I got my toughness from him. That's how he grew up, as a first generation Irishman in this country, and dedicated to work and an ethic like that. And I remember learning from him. We lived in Oak Park, Illinois at the time. And so about the age of 10 was when the Democratic Convention was happening. It was such an upheaval at that time. And he told me, Therese Ann, because when you're Catholic, you have two names. Therese Ann, you'll never meet a stranger. You'll never. And I remember we rode the buses at that time, and the L and all the things you do when you're a Chicago kid. And I just found joy in people, in meeting and talking, and intrigued by them. And so a huge influence for me he was. My grandmother from Ireland was, because she just loved us all so much and was such an integral part of our life, because my mom was so sick when we were little. And then many more as I got older and into business and things like that. And really girlfriends from high school who married right out of high school and had babies, like at 18 and 19, which was never my dream, ever. Never had that instinct to do that. And learned how it was to be around someone who was a full-time available parent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how about your stepmother? Was she an impact in your life?
Today, great glory to her. She got her angel wings just a year ago this week. Growing up, not so much. Again, a devout Catholic. But what I learned from her, Allie, was self-care. As a kid, we grew up thinking, put everyone else first. And when I met her, she put herself first. And I remember thinking, not nice thoughts. Let me just be honest. I was thinking, oh, she's so selfish. No, we would call that today centered in self.
Yeah.
Where she knew she had to take care of herself. There were 11 of us, right? Plus my father. And now I can, of course, I love that. And as a young adult, I understood that. I don't think she knew quite what to do with me. And I would say I probably got my spiritual awakening. I went to a Catholic high school, believe it or not. That wasn't my choice. It was what I was told to do. And I started having my awakening when I was a sophomore.
Really?
And learning the serenity prayer and thinking, oh, this is, I don't know that I would have called it that then, but I knew there was something bigger and in life than what I was growing up in, growing through. I can't say that the school helped me as much as being around spirituality, because it was a different kind of, it was a co-ed Catholic school, which was quite unusual in 1972 in Chicago. So we had a blend of male and female teachers, and those who would look to heightened, just to try to find the divinity in you so you could see it in yourself. So it was a big impact, even though I wouldn't say that I loved it, because I didn't understand finding Christ in things. Now, of course, I love that, but I didn't get it back then. Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow. So tell me a little bit more about this spiritual awakening. Because I'm feeling what you're saying, being in that environment, even though it's a Catholic high school, there's a certain degree of awareness around, being connected to God. And so I can see that would be a beautiful place to sort of explore that within yourself. I didn't go to Catholic high school. My sister did. So I have a little bit of awareness around that, and the energy is a little different in a Catholic high school versus a non-Catholic high school. So how did that affect you, having this awakening, as you're calling it?
We went sophomore year. They had, not freshman year, but sophomore year, junior and senior year, we would go to a place in Plano, Illinois. I understand it's still there. And it was a retreat center. And your whole class went if you wanted to go. And I remember, we'd sit, like kumbaya circles, and we'd sing, and we all helped cook and things like that. But we would go into meditation. I don't know that I knew that that's what it was then, but quiet time, right? And I was a big writer. I still am today, but poetry back then, to try to get all these feelings out that I had. And I could feel the shift of understanding. I wouldn't have called it God, because I was still angry at God about my mom and my grandma dying, and then other grandparents and friends moving away, things like that. What now I know is loss. So we're there for a whole weekend, and I just started realizing in my writing, it started to shift to acceptance, which now I know is such a key part of life. But that I had to accept what I was in right then, see people for who they were. It was quite diverse. I was not one of the popular kids, but I was, included in things. I wasn't a cheerleader, that kind of thing. I worked my whole high school life. Most of the kids did not then. So I found that my refuge was then in writing. And when we went on these retreats to hear, there was priests who were leading the retreats. They would lead you through these meditations, and a guided meditation, as we know today, can open up so many things in our lives. And that's what started me. And I can see it. I just recently found my poetry book, and I can see where the shift of being angry and blaming to, okay, it's me for myself. I still didn't know that God was with me all the time, but I was going to be okay because I knew of something bigger and better. Something, I guess you would call it a higher power, but I don't think I had those words.
Right. Yeah. So much goes on as we're growing up in our teenage years, these changes and shifts and feelings and evolution, I guess, is taking place. And when you talk about your writing poetry, I think back to my teenage years, and I was a drawer. I used to draw and paint. And so I'm thinking that many people probably in that time period of teenage years express themselves creatively, and that sort of opens us up to something deeper, something wider, something creative moving inside us. That I can see that now, that people may not be religious per se, but learning to express yourselves, whether it's through singing or playing music or writing poetry or painting, or is a way to feel that unity, that connectivity to the divine.
Yes. Yeah. And I did end up, singing. No, I'm not going to say I was a great singer, but, was recruited to get into the choir and things like that. And I think the influence was they had Jesuits teaching us, which is different than just a regular priest or a regular nun. I don't know what you would call that, but I know the Jesuits do start from the place from within you, the divinity and the wholeness that you are. And I'm not sure I was well aware of it then, but I do know that now.
Yeah. I remember when I first started going to church, we would often have a guest speaker, Father Larry from the Jesuits, that would come and speak. And it was such a blessing to have him come, because it felt holy. It felt sacred. Yeah.
Yes.
You could really feel the energy of, and he's not the only one. Since then, I've met many. But there is a particular energy that a person that has done that kind of deep inner work carries with them. It's almost like they're, and I know that we can all see ourselves as walking blessings, but for those individuals that have that, maybe they're, married to God, or, there's this deeper connection that really brings a healing energy and a healing presence.
Yes. Yeah.
So you grew up in that environment, and that the anger that you held, the anger that you experienced from losing your mother, your grandmother, and then, having this huge family, I'm sure that sort of added to that. And then getting away during a retreat like this, or opportunities to connect with those that carry that energy and give you an opportunity to go deeper, that must have really inspired this, you answering the call to become a minister later on in life.
Yeah, I never thought I would. My uncle was a priest, very big in Chicago and connected to Rome. So I got to see what it looked like, when he was over for Sunday dinner, with just him being my uncle. And I remember we had great conversations, because because I could have them with him. I'm not sure my brothers and sisters did, but I had what I would call a holy relationship with him, and asking him, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And I just became a big questioner, which I still am today. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Well, as I mentioned, my sister went to Catholic high school. My mother married a, a Catholic, and he had a special friend, Father Bill. Yeah, Father Bill, and he would come, and on the odd occasion, we didn't live close by, but when he did come, and I was young. I was 7, 8, 9 years old during this period, but I remember him being a very safe grown up, like someone that saw me.
Right. Right.
And I
Exactly. They
think
saw
that's,
you. Yeah.
it's really, I haven't thought of him for decades. So thank you for bringing all of this up because,
Yeah.
I'm 62. And so I can look back over the years and see those special people that came in and out of my life, whether it was for a reason, a season, that stirred something in me that gave me an insight or planted a seed that I might carry and then blossom or grow later on in my life. And I think Father Bill for me was one of those. And it sounds
Wow.
like your uncle and your grandfather, excuse me.
No, my uncle.
Oh, your uncle.
And I was also, as Catholics, are usually named after saints. So I was named after Saint Therese of Lisieux, France.
Mm.
And she got her calling when she was 13. She went into the convent, which was totally unheard of back in the day, as a teenager. And her vocation was love. So, of course, in Sunday school or Wednesday night catechism, we had to write about our saint. And I became very enthralled with her in high school. Like, who was she and why would she? Her mother also died when she was a child. And then she gave her life to God and died early in her early 20s. Of tuberculosis or something, but she just knew, and she speaks, Allie, as if she was a New Thought writer. You read her writings, and it's like this. I have this vocation of love, which of course is what we talk about, and I think that's where I got my mission statement from her. And so that was a whole, but you kind of had to do that on the side because people would have thought you were a little weird. Certainly, my brothers and sisters would have, but I know that there was some solace in there for me to understand what this awakening was that was happening inside of me. Yeah. Yeah.
Now you mentioned something. You said your grandmother was from Ireland.
Mm-hmm. Right
have you? Oh, so she came to America.
Oh, she and my grandfather, they weren't married at the time. Yeah, and they met in Boston after they came through Ellis Island. Yeah.
Okay, so have you been to Ireland?
I have. Several times.
Yeah, tell me about that. Tell me about.
Well, my dream was the first time I went with my uncle because I think I was 18. I think I just finished my first year of college, and we went, just he and I, and that was interesting because priests are held at the highest esteem in Ireland. It's a little kind of funny, today I can look at that. So he would wear his collar. He would use his collar. Let me just be real clear on that. And I was clear that he was using it to get us places and things like that. But to see Ireland through his eyes, where my grandma lived and my grandpa lived, the peat farm, and I love churches. So when I travel anywhere in the world, I always go to churches. I love them. And yet, I watched him be so honored and adored that it became unsettling for me. And I would talk to him about that. Like, everybody just thinks you're all that. And I probably was a sassy kid because I'm still sassy today. Uncle Jim, like, why do they all think you're all that? And he said, I'm a priest. I work for God, and I'm like, okay. So going home, I thought, because I just, in my late 20s, I'm going to go to Ireland and find the first Unity church there. That was my dream. Once I really got into Unity into my mid 30s, that's what I'm going to do. I never did it. I don't know that it could happen there, but it has become more laxed. I remember the second time I went back, Allie, I was divorced. Which of course is a sin in their language, not my own. And then they asked me that. My relatives are all the people that we met. I went with a bunch, probably 40 women. And we went as a group out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so the people that we met at all the functions we went to were like, well, you can't be, you can't be divorced because that's a sin. And I said, I don't believe that God will want me to live in hell. I was young. I was 30. I can't believe God would, and that was my marriage as it ended, was hell for me,
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so
Go ahead.
it got people going with conversations like, oh, because what I found out, Allie, is they just stayed in their marriages, but they had extramarital affairs. I wasn't willing to do that. I was going to be bold. I was the first one divorced in my family, which,
wow.
Today I think I'm a trailblazer. Back then I was not.
Wow.
Yeah.
That really reminds me. Our family got a blessing. My sister married her husband, and his parents were a priest and a nun. And so this is in England, I know. And I feel so blessed to know them. I mean, we went for a family wedding in Sicily. And so 50 of us from England and us, my husband and I from America, we were in Sicily for 3 weeks. And my in-laws now, Dave and Teresa, they're very Catholic and they're very devout, but I feel so blessed by them because they're so open-minded and so generous.
Yes.
And they took us on a trip with them to see many of the cathedrals and churches, the Catholic cathedrals and churches in Sicily, Palermo and Catania. And so we went and visited on Easter week and with them, and it was just amazing to have their depth of knowledge and that special energy that they bring whenever I'm with them, to that occasion was truly a blessing.
And I'm grateful to hear that story, that they followed their hearts.
Yes.
Because what I know, just because I studied enough, that the church, it was in the 1100s that it became the law under Gregory that priests couldn't get married, and that was all because of the land. Who was going to get the land when the priest died? It would go to the family. So then the law was instituted through the church that they would not get married and everything would belong to the church. So, that's what I encourage people to do, is to study. I think people are attracted to me because they knew I was Catholic, and for 43, for a long time, lived in Chicago for 43 years. But to see that certain things were put into place because it worked for the church at the time, and in controlling the people that needed to be done according to their consciousness at that time. It doesn't mean it fits today. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, we're going to take a very short break.
All right.
And we'll be back and we'll dive a little bit more into your life and the work that you're doing currently.
Perfect. Okay.
We'll see you in a minute.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
I've been thinking. This volunteer dinner deserves a standout video, something with real impact. But hiring a big production team for just one video? The cost would be huge.
I get it. But have you thought about New Thought Media Network? They do amazing work beyond just broadcast programming on YouTube. They actually specialize in high-quality, one-off productions for events like ours. And I heard they're super affordable.
Really? I didn't realize they did that. So they focus on quality without the premium price tag.
Exactly. Plus, Dr. Robert runs the whole thing, and he's all about making great media accessible. We could get the professional look we need without going overboard on costs.
His sounds perfect. Let's get in touch with Dr. Robert and see if they can work their magic for us.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Welcome back to Growing Edge Live. I'm here with my guest, Therese Lee, and we are talking all about her life, and how she became this beautiful minister and grief recovery method specialist. So let's talk a little bit about your purpose. Like, you have shared with us that you found unity, and maybe we start there. You found unity, and what next?
So my uncle, who was the priest, was passing away at Northwestern Hospital in Chicago, and I was with my dad, and I went with my father to see him, and I told him I was getting divorced, and he was the one who had married me, and I said, Uncle Jim, I'm getting divorced, and this is what he said, Allie. He took my hand and he said, he spoke through a box in his throat at the time, and he said, Therese Ann, God loves you. Let your light shine and be happy. Mm. And I was 28 years old. And I remember walking out with my father, and I said, Uncle Jim said the weirdest thing to me. And he's like, what did he say? And I told him, and he's like, okay. We kind of walked, because of course, that was a little out of the box. We walked back, whatever. We probably went and got a hot dog or something. 2 weeks later, I went for the first time to Unity in Chicago, which was on Tome at this beautiful old building that is no longer there. And I walked in late, as I did for the first 10 years at Unity. And the minister said, welcome home. God loves you. Be happy and let your light shine.
Oh, wow.
I'm sitting in an upper room, way in the back, 1,300 people at the time. I mean, it was a big, big audience. And I cried the whole time. And afterwards, I went up to the minister and said, hi, I want to come back again. I had driven an hour to get there because, of course, I didn't want anyone to know in my neighborhood or my parents to know I was going to Unity. And so we spoke, and he said, keep coming back. And his name was Mike Matoyan, quite a legend in history, in Unity history, at least. And he's now with God. And I did. Anytime I was traveling all over the world, so I would go to wherever there was a Unity church. But when I was in Chicago, I would drive down to see him, and I would go late and I would leave early and cry, literally, Allie, for probably the first 10 years, and realized, oh my gosh, this message, this New Thought message, with Unity's take on it was so me. And so I worked until I was 39 and realizing I was getting my calling to be a minister, and that I was no longer wanting to work for money. I was very successful and pulled down a big chunk of change, so to speak. Thank God now, as I'm getting ready for Social Security. And that's what I did. I would go to church. I went to different churches all the time just to see what all the different Unity people would be like. But I'd go, if they had 2 services, I was there first thing in the morning until after, took as many classes as I could, studied on the road. And I really think I was like a sponge. And I just when I found out the very first time I took a Bible class that the Hail Mary, as I learned as a young Catholic girl, was not in the Bible. And I'm like, no, it is. Like my mom said it was, and I'm like, kind of like, I'm, all Irish about it. And it was like, blessed art thee among women is in the Bible, Therese. The rest is a prayer that the church made up. And I was like, well, the church made up prayers? Like what? I went from no affiliation at all to any kind of a spiritual community to then being like just jumping in and taking as many classes and inspired, like what else, did Jesus say? What didn't Jesus say? Who is God? And I jumped right in, both feet. I volunteered. And then at 39, quit corporate America to go back to school to get my undergraduate degree so I could go to ministerial school, because at the time you needed a degree to get into Unity seminary. And it was quite awesome. Everyone thought I was the biggest weirdo in the whole wide world. I didn't care. I was so at peace, Allie. I was so, I just knew it. I just knew this was what I needed to be. And I had no idea how I would live. I have money in the bank, but how do you live, doing all of that? So I went back to school to get my undergraduate and to seminary at the same time.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And so where were you living at this time?
In Chicago.
In Chicago.
Yeah.
So once you graduated from ministerial school, then what?
Well, then I was married. I had gotten married. In the meantime, I had met Tom through some schooling and like instantly knew he was my guy. And I remember saying to him, I'm not going to do church. I'm going to be like a public speaker, travel around and do all of that. And he was like, well, I think we would do great church together. And we did. We really did. As a male and a female talking, we did them together on Sunday morning, presented the lessons, which was quite unheard of. Still today is quite unheard of. And so I went to seminary. We got married. We went to seminary together, even though we got married, but you had to apply individually. And we moved to Unity Village together after we got married. And so literally for 2 years, we sat in a classroom and the teachers rotated, and it was full-time school. Dressed ministerially every day, which, we don't need to do that today. Closed-toed shoes, nylons. It was 2004. Fabulous learning. And again, now so I'm at DePaul University in Chicago, which is also Jesuits, right? Learning about life and taking classes based on my own work experience, which was great. They gave you credit for that. And then and that was all online while I'm diving into in-person excavating of what do I believe and why do I believe it? And do I believe it? Or is it something that it's embedded, that embedded theology because my mom believed it or my dad believed it or my uncle, or because I was Catholic? How was I going to unlearn all of those things so I could be who Therese was and who she's supposed to be? Yeah.
So when did you, so I asked, what is your purpose? So what is your purpose now? And how does that relate to this grief recovery method?
Okay. So I've been a peacemaker in my family. That was first just because I was assigned that, and then I became one because I like it. So I've taken all sorts of mediation skills and things like that, and did a lot of work with Unity churches the first 10 or 15 years of my career. And it kept shifting, to then be a person who can love out loud so people are interested in who you are. I wear sparkles in my hair. You can't really see them. I wear blue nail polish. So people, and I'm a redhead, natural redhead. So that draws people, I think, just because there's not a lot of us around. So, and I'm not shy. So the intrigue is there. And then, especially now in the South, as a woman as a minister, it's quite a novelty still for people. So to love out loud is my mission and my purpose. How I do that is different. I became a widow at 53 when my husband died unexpectedly. And I realized all the skills I had were not going to help me to pray away this pain that I had. And I realized that I was not going to do what I had done my whole life, which was stuff it and then become strong and move on. I had learned way too much about the head and the heart connection and living from my heart. So I had to hear what my body was telling me, what my emotions were telling me. And it was 2019. Actually, the day of his funeral, someone gave me the book, the Grief Recovery Method Handbook. And I remember looking at it like, thank you, and just kind of like shoving it somewhere under my seat or something, and didn't really look at it again until probably 2015. So about 3 or 4 years later, and still really couldn't get into it. I think I was trying to get through the stages of grief that aren't really stages of grief. Now I know. And thinking if I could just make it through. And someone invited me to walk alongside my grief when I broke down in the middle of a store one day, based on the song that was going on. And she came over and said to me, I said, I'm just trying to get through this grief. And she said, may I invite you to walk alongside it? And I said, I don't know what that means. And she said, look up the Grief Recovery Method. I was in Mobile, Alabama, getting ready to do a retreat. And I was like, oh, I have that book. And so I went back to it and then kept getting encouraged, like, okay, this is now something I want to do. Can I somehow through my life demonstrate what it looks like to have this great loss and then walk alongside it to re-engage in living and to make each of those relationships that were unresolved, right? Going all the way back to my mother and my grandmother, can I complete them through this process, which is what the Grief Recovery Method does.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. There's so many things that I'm seeing, as you're explaining all this. And so I want to come back to this Grief Recovery Method. You're also a minister, the senior minister at Hilton Head Unity.
Yes.
So how long have you been in this position?
I'm going into my 8th year here.
Okay.
And I've been ordained 18. So I've been on the pulpit for 18 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Somewhere.
And so how does this all blend together for you? Being a specialist in the Grief Recovery Method, being a minister, how can people work with you? What does it look like? And maybe share some things that might be helpful for those that are newly experiencing loss and grief.
So first of all, it's non-theologically based. So I can only talk about God, which is the love of my life, if the person I'm working with brings it up, right? So if you talk about God, then we can. Otherwise, we're going to work on completing the relationship to the pain and the loss, the isolation and loneliness that happens with each loss or change in your life. They may or may not include death. Because as we start doing this work, what I also realized was, as a kid, I went to 8 grade schools. By the time I was 13, I also lived in 8 different homes with my family, and we just moved. So that's a lot of loss and change on top of then, almost at the end, my mom passing away, right? And dogs dying and your grandmother dying. So how I didn't realize that I thought grief only had to do with when someone died. And what I've come to understand and really learn and know now is that change and loss are what cause grief, may or may not include death. And so this then has opened my horizons to work with veterans who, well, they probably did witness death, but they also had a big change in their life. Someone who has a physical, someone who has breast cancer, right, and loses a body part, they also have a loss. So it's opened me up to working with so many different types of people. Religion is not involved, and that's what I say to them, so that invites them in. Also, this process is about honoring everyone's loss and their grief at 100%. So when I have groups together, I don't ask them, what is your loss? I say, I'm having this group on loss and change. Would you like to come? Would you want to participate? Right. So then they come, and only then do I come to know, or does everybody else in this group understand? Someone had a dog died. Someone had, lost a body part. Someone had a cat die. Someone had a mom die. Someone had a baby die 60 years ago, when you're working with 80-year-olds. And so again, honoring that everyone grieves at 100%. It becomes unresolved grief. It becomes complicated grief and accumulated grief because everything just keeps, kind of piling up. And so this way, then there's no comparison. I have a husband who died. Someone else might also be a widow. We don't compare that. And I can't ever understand how anyone else feels. I understand what grief feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me a safe space for them.
Mm-hmm.
My whole job, you wouldn't know today by the fact that I'm talking so much, is to listen to the stories. So the process is writing out. You have homework every week. And I also do one-on-one. I do a lot more one-on-one 7-week programs as well. So the person does writing, not on the computer, literally writing, because we know this through education. Once in the mind, through the arm, and writing it out helps us process the loss and the change and the pain. And then they read the homework to me, and all I am, one of the logos for the grief recovery is a heart with ears. And so I just listen without judgment, without comment. When they're complete, I turn back on we do it on Zoom or in person, then I'll speak again and we'll talk about what it is. Most people never get the chance to tell the story without being interrupted. Well, you could be grateful for, or, oh, well, at least you had, what I heard at my husband's funeral was, well, thank God you're only 53. You still have time. Because people don't know what to do with their pain, and they feel like they should fix it somehow, where really what I've also learned is silence is the best. I'm sorry. I'm with you. I'm breathing with you, that kind of a response. But people don't know that because we don't teach it. We don't teach about grief in society. Yeah. So that's my mission now, Allie, is to say, look, not I'm a survivor, like I'm thriving, and I'm no longer mourning. However, I'm still grieving. Right. And we do that with, if you love, you're going to grieve.
Yeah.
2-legged or 4-legged. Right. Someone loses a pet bird. They're going to feel the same as someone who loses a husband. Yeah. Depending upon the relationship. So there's no judgment on what the relationship is with. It also can be with intangible things. So I lost my home after my husband died, right? Okay, that's another loss. It's intangible. So in this process, we go through all of the tangible ones we can find. Then we start getting into the intangible ones, the moving. And what I find here in Hilton Head is a lot of people will move down thinking, yes, I'm here in paradise, and they have to go to Charleston to find a store. Right? A good store, right? Maybe Savannah, maybe, but probably not. And so they don't know why they're feeling verklempt, and they should on themselves that, well, I shouldn't feel bad because I live here and this is so great. So we take all that away. We're not saying minimalize your feelings, because if you don't address your feelings, they will come up somehow in your physical body.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is the holiday season coming up. We've just had Thanksgiving, and we're moving into the Christmas season, and lots of other faith traditions have celebrations around this time of year and the new year. And so there's a likelihood that you and I and many of our viewers are going to be around family. And it's not always easy when you've had a loss, especially a husband or a child, as many of our viewers know. And I lost a son, you've lost a husband. Yeah. And so we also are grandmothers. And so how do you navigate the Thanksgiving table, the Christmas table, anytime you get together and that loss of your husband is felt, or maybe you even talk about him? How does that unfold? And do you have some suggestions for those that have, maybe this is their first Thanksgiving or Christmas without their loved ones? How do we navigate that?
Well, first of all, always know that no is a complete sentence. My first year, with someone who invited me to my first Thanksgiving, I said, my answer is yes today. And only if up until the time I'm supposed to be there, my answer could be no. because I don't know what I'm going to feel like as I get ready for that. Now I'm 12 years out, right? So what I do every month, the first or second day, so this weekend, what I will be doing, I was doing and will be doing today even, is looking ahead to the month. What is this month? So now we know it's Christmas time, right? And all the holiday things. What might I be sad about? Let me think about and I'll write them down. I'm going to be sad. I'm going to, what am I doing Christmas Eve? What will I be doing Christmas Day? I make things a season now versus a day, because sometimes I am alone on those days. I also make time. So my husband was a big NASCAR fan, and he loved ahi tuna and things like that. So I'm not sure I'll watch a NASCAR race, but I might. Depends on who I'm with, right? If I'm with my son, I'll be like, hey, want to watch NASCAR? Because that's what his dad would do. I'll do things that remind me of him, and I'll play favorite songs. So then I'll just sit and I'll be like, honey, I'm having Christmas with you today. It might be the 15th of December. But before I go to be with everybody else and be Nana or be the stepmother, or to be the minister on duty, right? I will make sure that I've spent enough time alone with my memories. And it may include actually opening a card that I might have had, allowing for tears, always allowing for the emotion. And if I'm out in the store and hear a song, and I might leave that store and come home, get the song, listen to it, so I can be with it and be real and say verbally out loud, Allie, what I want them to know today. Even 12 years later, honey, I miss you. Do you remember when we did this? So to kind of recall all of these things that, so for my mother, I have said recently, as I've learned more about our relationship together, thank you for teaching me how to make those chocolate chip cookies, with nuts. But Mom, I don't make them with nuts today. I don't like the nuts in them. I never liked that, but I didn't want to tell you that then. So it's a conscious conversation that I actually have out loud. And this means then we have to be discerning on who it is that's around with us when we're having those conversations. Mm-hmm. And also decide who you want to be with on these special days. And so I would say, to folks, if you expect me to be jolly when I come over this first Thanksgiving or first Christmas, which I was alone because I went to work in California. Mm-hmm. After he died to take a job. I was at Unity of Santa Barbara. So I was not with my kids. And that was a choice we made economically. And so the people I was with, I said, I'd rather just be alone or I'll be just with one or two. But you'll know, when you get honest with yourself, or I'm going to come for 15 minutes. I'm going to come and I'm going to stay for dinner, but I'm not going to stay for dessert. And start setting up boundaries for yourself so that you're safe. And safety is a thing so that you're comfortable. You use whatever word that you want, because if you have to act as like everything's fine, you're not being truthful to yourself. And then you get home and you crash in a different way. And so even today, like I'll be with them all for Christmas, my kids, all three kids of Tom's and the 8 grandbabies. And I live alone. So that's a lot after the second day, right? Even though I'm so used to being around people. So I'll make sure that I have my own room. It might just be an office like that I'm cramming my mattress into, but I have time to recharge. Nana's going to take a nap now while the boys are taking a nap. And I'll literally just check out from the family. And then I'll come back out in an hour, set the timer. They now know that about me. And I might have had to pull over the girls at one time. So I'm checking out so I can be available to you all. And that means I have to know what I need. And we're not used to doing that, Allie, when we're moms and we're grandmas and we're dads and grandpas. So I encourage that. Understand what you need to take care of you. Because then you'll be all the more better and fun when you get together.
Yeah. I think of the term conscious grieving when you're sharing all of these sort of boundaries and insights into having to take care of yourself,
right?
And to consciously grieve, so that when you do decide to be with family, when you've made it safe for yourself, that you can show up in a way that feels right for you, knowing that you can leave if you've already set that intention that you might. And I also love when you were sharing about the cookies with your, you were having that conversation out loud. I think so many people, and I know I hear this from my husband, he was a hospice chaplain for some time. So many people don't, they stuff a lot of their grief, their memories. They just don't want to think about that part of their life because, they think they may explode or they may not.
Right. They don't think they're going to be able to get through it.
Right. And so there's all this stuff at the end of life. If you haven't consciously taken time to process your feelings, to process your grief, then there's all these regrets or sadness that maybe come up. So I can see that this method, that having a guide like you to work through this, to like an accountability partner, to be able to work through this, to really explore your feelings, to explore your grief, so that you can show up in your world as the light, right? And love out loud.
Right. Because I don't know your answer. So the only request is, will you be totally honest with yourself to the best of your ability? Right. And then as a listener, you can hear where there might be spots you want to fill in. And that's what I'll say. So tell me more about this one. And then they might be able to, because they're going to create their own loss history graph. And when you start looking from the day of conscious memory and the day you were born till today, you've had a lot of loss in your life. Have you addressed each of those? Right. Whatever it could be. And you put in your animals and your parents and your grandparents, your jobs, girlfriends, whatever it is, jewelry you might have lost. And sometimes it's like, it's just a piece of jewelry. Why would you be worried about it? Because I don't have it anymore. Mm-hmm. And so there's no minimalizing to what the loss is. And that's what I watch people come in like this and they walk out like this, head high, willing to have the tears come.
Beautiful.
And embrace them. Yeah.
I see someone says wonderful guidance for navigating the holidays. Therese is an awesome light in the world. Well, we are right here at the end of our session together. I've so enjoyed having you.
Thank you.
Talking about grief and learning about you. It's been such a delight. Thank you, Therese, for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Allie, for all that you do and all that the New Thought Network does for us. Awesome. Very grateful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. This has been another great conversation. Please share it with your friends. And I will see you next week with Reverend David Leonard from CSL Huntsville, Alabama. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a great week. Mwah. Peace and blessings to you.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth, to live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge.